stadium. Totally wicked stadium. Pretty diabolical. When it comes to players who have stood out this season, really not much has to be said about the main players like your Lomax, your Robies, Walmsley. But the few players when it comes to the young guys to keep an eye out for is the obvious Morgan Knowles and Regan Grace. But the other development that I'm keen to see in the following seasons, if we keep a hold of him, is Danny Richardson. In the few games that he did play, he offered some spark in attack, which would be interesting to see how, with the new coaching of Justin Holbrook, how we can develop him. Those have just been some of the things that have stood out for 2017 for me personally. I probably have forgotten a few things. Again, thank you for listening to me. See you next season. Cheers.
Okay, nice one, Froggers, with the quintessential Australian accent there. That's what I took from that one. Apart from the points he made about his team, it was that if it was just he couldn't the most. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and he said almost all the things that I've written down in my notes, so this is going to be fun.
There you go.
David Pye said, So David Pye claims to not be a St Helens fan, doesn't he?
Yes,
but then he sent us a review of the season for St Helens,
yes.
So stop lying, David. I mean, he's lucky that his big strapping son is on the books there now, so he can say, well, I'm just supporting my son, but no, we know. He said, my hometown St Helens started poor after a change of leadership, slowly grew, and in the end, we're close to a GF appearance. I actually think they stood a good chance had they got there. So things look good for 2018 if their development continues, which I think it will. Roby was outstanding and the future looks bright with some good young players. Sean Dewsbury, a new name for me. But
I think it's Sean Ainscote from Dewsbury.
Thanks for getting in touch, Sean. He said, depressing under Cunningham, optimistic under Holbrook, heartbreaking end to season, can't wait for 2018 with Holbrook and Barber. Aidan Stalker said, I'm still recovering from how St Helens' season ended, but in hindsight there was encouraging signs. Bringing through players like Grace and Richardson whilst having Barber finish the season strong gives me hope that Justin Holbrook is the right man in charge. If James Roby can keep up his ridiculous standards, then we'll give it a good go next year.
Okay, so what did you make of St Helens this season then?
It's kind of like what everyone sort of spoke about, the shit times under KFC and then the good times under Holbrook. When Kieran Cunningham sacked, they had a 3 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw record, so it doesn't sound as bad as it was, but they were miserable performances.
Yeah.
They then went 2 wins and 3 losses under the caretaker regime, but it felt equally as miserable, and there wasn't any kind of I didn't see what was to come next, because in Justin Holbrook's first game in charge, properly, it was the best win of the year, I would suggest. The 45-0 win over Hull at Magic Weekend.
Which no one saw coming.
No, and actually, other than that, I think they were a big surprise that they made the top 4 finish, especially when they were 6th in points scored, and overall in the season, they were 8th in points scored before the split.
Right.
So, the top 4 finish was based on 2 things: home form and defence. Only the top 2 had better home success rate. Huddersfield of the top 8 had a worse away record. They were poor on the road, but they were great at home. So they played more close games than any other side. 45% of all their games ended either level or within 6 points either way. At home, they won 4 and drew 1 of their 7 close games, whereas away they only won 2 and lost 5 of their close away games, including that crucial semi-final at Cass, obviously. So that kind of shows they were a different sort of, even though they were a competitive side home and away, they were a different sort of side at home to away. I could sit here and knock Saints' attack. It wouldn't be hard. They had the joint worst in points and tries per game in the top 8, despite making the most metres per game of any side, mostly because they had the most total errors of any side. But instead, I think that'd be wrong. I think it would be it would be right only really if I focus on their defence, which was the best in terms of points and tries allowed per game, and was what they built their eventual relative success on. Fewer than 3 tries allowed on average per game. I think that's absolutely exceptional through the whole season that they played. Well done to them for that. They conceded the fewest penalties per game as well, so good discipline. They were second best in terms of the amount of metres and breaks they gave up per game as well. So they were good in contact and good at covering for each other and closing space down and stuff like that. Individually, you have to focus on Alex Walmsley. He, ran away with a prop spot in our dream team. Is already possibly going to be rampant for England, we hope. He did all his best work with the ball. One Saints player who did. An impressive 11 tries and a top 10 tackle bust count, but most impressive was that he ended with the most carries and the most metres in Super League, and still went at 8.1 metres per carry, which is huge for a forward. The other Saints player to pick out is Mark Percival, and again, I'm not going to dwell too much on him leading the league in errors. Instead, I'm going to say that he was both Saints' top try scorer and the top try scoring centre in Super League, with 17. He added 13 assists to that. He was third in all centres in his assist count. He was third in the league in tackle busts, which led all centres. He was also second of all regular centres in metres made. He was second in the league at making clean breaks. He was also in the top 5 centres for total successful offloads. So basically, right up there at the top in terms of centres for attacking stats. Saints Helens' attack over the whole piece has to be incredibly grateful that he only missed 2 games this year, because how shit would they have been with the ball without him, I would suggest.
Oh, they'd have been garbage. Look, St Helens this season was the reverse of Salford in many ways, in that they were underwhelming to start with and then started peaking towards the end. And actually the brand of rugby league that Justin Holbrook got them playing, whilst they still placed a premium on defence, and that's been something we've talked about from the beginning of the Super League pod, is the way that they've gone about doing that. Whilst he placed that premium on defence and maintained that culture, he did bring more out of them in terms of diverse play as well. Under Cunningham, they were very one-dimensional.
Oh, yeah.
With Holbrook, there were options. Now, was that, partly because of the players he had coming back? Lomax started playing a bit better under Justin Holbrook, I would argue. And then towards the very back end of the season, they had Ben Barber to add into the mix. But I think it was happening prior to Ben Barber's arrival.
He got Richardson and Farge being a lot more creative.
Exactly, and he was putting some faith in those younger lads as well. I mean, Farge is widely experienced, but getting young Richardson in the team as well, through necessity, was paid off and did well. And they did well for St Helens. So there's not a great deal more I can add to the season. Next year, where do I think they're going to be? Well, it largely depends on their attack, doesn't it? They can defend. It's whether or not they can click in attack. And they've got more. They've got.
That's what we know them for, isn't it?
Weapons,
over the piece. That's what we've known them for. Yeah. The entertainers or what have you. But
if they can get back to that and maintain some defensive integrity, then they'll be there or thereabouts for a top 4 finish again, I would say. Okay, so from St Helens we'll head over to West Yorkshire and to Bellevue, no matter how temporarily. Wakefield Trinity Wildcats, Mark.
Who massively exceeded...
Wakefield Trinity.
Who massively exceeded expectations with their 5th place top 8 finish. We both had them in the qualifiers. I had them first, you had them third. Both of us had them dipping out of the cup early doors as well, but they made the quarterfinals, so they won a couple of games there. Well, they get a game there. So, much better performance than we were anticipating for Wakefield, and I'm sure Brian is going to fill us in on all of that with his nice little swipe at Wigan at the end for his positive finish to the season. Take away, Brian.
To make the top 8 in 2016 as a result of Salford's salary cap breach was a great outcome for Trinity. And Chris Chester had done really well in his first year. However, I was a bit nervous about his second year until John Keir was appointed as Director of Football or Rugby or whatever they call it. But it worked really well, John Keir bringing his experience to help Chester, who the jury's still out for me, and we'll see in due course whether he turns out to be a good coach or whether he's just got a couple of seasons in him. Anyway, the season started pretty badly from Wakey's point of view, certainly from results. We lost to Hull and then we lost to Huddersfield. And Sam Williams seemed to be the coach's choice as the main halfback, breaking up the Liam Finn and Jacob Miller partnership that had worked so well last year. Finn was on the bench and was called on from time to time when things weren't going too well. What also rankled with the Speckies was that Williams seemed to be the first choice goal kicker, despite Liam Finn having scored hundreds of goals over the years with a much better strike rate. But that soon sorted itself out, and the natural balance was restored as Liam Finn was brought back into the team and Williams moved on to the bench. That continued until Jacob Miller got injured partway through the season, and Finn and Williams then became the half-back pairing. So after those first couple of defeats, we then got a win at St Helens, and then beat Salford at home when Ben Murdoch-Masilla kindly dropped the ball on the line in the last couple of minutes for the Reds. We then lost at Leeds, and then a series of matches came along that any team who wants to do well would expect to win. And we did. We beat Leigh, Catalan and Widnes. before defeats to Cass, Wigan and Warrington over Easter. But then after the Easter break, again we got some friendly fixtures for us. We beat Catalans, Leigh, Widnes at the Magic Weekend, Huddersfield, before then going to the DW Stadium and destroying Wigan. We then backed that up, beating Salford away in the league 24-34, and things were going really well. We lost narrowly to Leeds, and then returned to Salford in the Cup. That was an absolute shocker from Wakey. A big following from Trin, and there was a lot of expectation. But unfortunately, that was the worst performance of the season for us, and we limped out of the Challenge Cup. We backed that up then with another defeat at Hull, before going to Warrington and getting victory then. And then we lost by 1 point to Castleford at Wakey. We followed that up with a great win away at Widnes, where we absolutely destroyed them, and then came into the final game of the first 23, where we buckled under the pressure of finishing in the top 4 and lost to Saints. We then moved into the top 8 and started off with an absolute shocker at Huddersfield, losing 36-6. It looked like maybe we was in for a repeat of last year's top 8 challenge. But then we destroyed Leeds at home before losing to Castleford on their league leaders night. Tyler Randall joined us shortly after that, and the following week we went to Salford and Tyler Randall took them apart. We followed that up with a game against St Helens. That's probably a match that Scott Grips won't remember too kindly, but it's probably the sort of match that he'll be remembered for the rest of his career. Having lost agonisingly to St Helens, we then went to Hull and lost by a point there, as Liam Finn's drop goal in the last seconds just went wide. So we went into our final game of the season knowing that we couldn't make the top 4, and so we had the usual traditional nilling of Wigan, as we just ran, this time only 32 points past them. So, good season overall for Trinity. We've turned ourselves into a good team to watch. It's actually enjoyable rugby watching us. We rarely fall to pieces these days, and we've got a bit of resilience in the team. So if we go behind, there's a fair chance that we're going to fight back into it. We've got a fan's favourite in David Fafita, very much in the David Solomona style, just someone you just love to see with the ball in his hands. Doesn't always come off, but is absolutely great to watch and really makes it enjoyable. So the season finished then with some really good news, hopefully, that the new stadium might be around the corner. So overall, pretty good year. Be a big challenge to sort of match it or improve on it next year, but here's hoping.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian, who will hopefully be listening to us now from Australia now that he's landed and and the first thing he'll have done, of course, will be flick open his device and download these 2 episodes of the Super League pod. Other fan reviews that came in, Mark, quite short and sweet from our Wakefield friends.
Yeah, Martin France said team spirit, and that summed up the season. Andy Lee said not getting relegated was his review of the season.
Well, I'm basing what I have to say about Wakefield on those 2 reviews because I think team spirit was very important for them, and it was obviously something that had been engendered from the outset in this Wakefield side. They do seem to work hard for each other, and there was a lot of players that you might call journeyman or underrated or whatever that actually had good seasons, and it was almost like Wakefield were greater than the sum of their parts at times when guys like England and Dave Fafita were absolutely rampant for them. Matty Ashurst had a fabulous season and has taken tons and tons of plaudits, and deservedly so. But at the start of the season, you wouldn't have hung your hat on Matty Ashurst being as influential.
No, he wasn't far away in the second rower.
No, far from it. And then once they started settling, once they got a settled halves combination, and dropped this Miller-Finn combination and started placing more faith in, when they stopped placing faith in Sam Williams and adopted the Miller-Finn combination, started making that work for them, I think then they kicked on and had a good period of time in the season as well. I actually think they could be very pleased with this top 5 finish, obviously.
Hugely.
It probably wasn't on the cards, and I think Wakefield fans are unused to expecting their team to kick on and do well. I think that they can build on this, and I think Chris Chester has proven that it wasn't just a one-season wonder for them. And whilst he's had some experienced help in that of John Keir, I don't think John Keir will be too keen to kind of do it all for Chris Chester. I think Chris Chester isn't being backseat driven.
John Keir's not exactly a training ground coach, is he?
No, exactly.
No.
So I think they've got a good combination going on there at Wakefield.